All right. Today I'm joined with Ashley. Ashley has a podcast available on her site on Instagram, and she's going to tell you more about it. But she has a story to tell about her trauma from her childhood that rocked her to the core, and she made it through to the other side, and she speaks about it in her podcast. And she's helping others with trauma, sexual abuse trauma from their childhood. So she's taken the negative and turned it into a positive, which is a great thing. And she had a lot of strength, a lot of tenacity to get her word out, whatever it takes. So how you doing, Ashley? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you for being on.
Great. Yeah. So, let's jump into it. So I will start with a question, which is, can you share a bit about your personal journey and what led you to become involved in mental health, basically? I saw your page. You are into generational trauma. What got you involved in this?
I was sexually abused when I was 7 years old, and the trauma just kind of took over my life. And I didn't really have a place to come out and tell my family about it. I was raised to believe that what happened in the home we didn't speak about with other people. And I tried to reach out to some family members to let them know what was going on, and it really took the death of my abuser to really shake me to my core, to get me to confront the trauma. I was always hiding from it. I was always escaping. I was always just surviving. I wasn't living. And I got to a breaking point when the suicidal ideation was kicking in, and it finally was like, if I don't address this head on, it's going to consume me. And so April of 2022, last year, my abuser, which was my grandfather, died, and it shook everything up from what my family dynamics was. I decided to come forward, with it a month after he died, to let the family know my version of who I experienced, may have not been theirs, and I was so angry because I couldn't understand how they could mourn him when, he had taken so much from me that I just couldn't see beyond that, and it took me to the core, and so I felt like at that point, there was so much I needed to address, as an adult, as a wife, as a mother, being sexually abused at such a young age, that I just needed to externalize it, and when I finally got the courage, I told my husband about it, and I was kind of scared, what his perception was, but he has always been my biggest supporter, and my number one fan, to say that he wants to see me take this trauma and make something of it, and show my children that you can overcome so many obstacles, in life, things that are meant to take you down, and you can turn around and you can find a community of other people. I used to think it was me. I was alone in this, until I shared my story. And I was overwhelmed with how many responses I got from other people. I'll say people because it was from both men and women, that have been through similar circumstances. And, the same thing, the family dynamics, growing up was we don't talk about these things. And so many of us relate to that. And it's like, in order for us to change it, we got to address it. We got to feel it. We got to heal it. And then on top of that, how do we continue that? And so I decided to start my podcast, speaking out the podcast, because I feel there's so many things that we need to talk about, and we need to cultivate, kindness and compassion, and those things, we find in helping and healing with others. And that's kind of how I started, and it's been crazy. I've received backlash, from family for speaking my truth. And out of my entire family, my mom is the only one, that has stood right there with me, facing it all and walking away from the toxicity. If you can't hold yourself accountable, you can't change, you don't want to change, and you don't want to listen to the things that have happened, you're not breaking the cycle. You're just enabling it to continue. And for what I want for my children is to never experience any of the things that I did growing up, or for them to know that they can always come to, someone, their parents, their family members, that there is a safe space. I want to provide that for someone else because I didn't have that for so long. And this community of other mental health advocates, is something that I truly felt that I needed to be a part of.
And there's a lot of healing in that, right? When in speaking out, talking, and you've told your story, I'm sure, a few times, and every time I'm sure you feel a little bit better, a little bit stronger, that you're just saying, hey, I'm not holding this in no more. I've told 20 people by now. I told 30 people. And the more you tell, the more you just feel empowered by it.
Yeah, I feel it releases the shame. I felt shameful for going through these experiences. I felt shameful for the things I did while I was in survival mode, and I think a lot of it is giving myself grace to say I wasn't living, I was surviving, and if it was coping with alcohol or drugs or just wanting to be out of the headspace that unfortunately I was confined to, and it's allowing myself to say, hey, I did what I needed to do to survive, but what am I going to do to live? And I think that's the point where I'm at right now, is I'm tired of surviving. We only have one life, and I don't want to waste it allowing the trauma to consume me. So what can I do? I can be a part of the change. We can empower each other, and, we can learn, what may work for one may work for someone else. And we may, learn and take a little bit from each other and continue, to spread the awareness that there are so many different things, that people are going through. And, if we just continue to be supportive, we can change these things. It may not be now, and it may not be for our kids, but it's the generations that come. How many generations, if I think back of healing in my ancestry, am I healing? There's so many, we don't talk about this. And, the abuse, I have later found out that it wasn't just me, and that's the hardest part is if, we were taught to speak about these things, generations before, how many, people could have been saved by further trauma, but now we can, we can keep looking forward, and that's like the biggest thing for me.
What do you think was the backlash for that your family didn't want that information out there? I mean, it was a terrible information. Why do you feel like they were upset with you about it?
I used to think it was embarrassment, culturally, you bring family, shame. And I think the biggest part is that they just didn't want to acknowledge it. They didn't want to believe that he was this type of person, and it's so hard for me to see otherwise, that I can remember times before where he wasn't this way, and it used to make me feel guilty because we had so many good memories prior to this, but then that's when I started educating myself on what grooming was, and I think a lot of my family too doesn't understand the dynamics of what those things are, and they refuse to acknowledge that. And I would rather put it out there, so that they're careful with their kids, and you can't always be trusting. That's my biggest thing is trusting of other people, and you can't really, just think, oh, well, I'm, so and so is safe with my kid, or my kid is safe with so and so. No, you have to have that mentality. I'm a living testimony of how screwed up your life can be when somebody sexually abuses you, especially as a child. There's so much more trauma that I've gone through. I'm 39 years old now. From the time that I was 7, I've lived more life in trauma than I have not. I don't recall life before trauma. It's just become, I felt like it took my identity. I felt like I was always defined by my sexual abuse until I spoke about it, and now I don't look at it as something negative because, I started volunteering with my local rape and crisis center the beginning of this year, shortly after I spoke out and created my podcast. I felt like I needed to do more. But now I take that identity as something, is look at what I'm doing with it. It doesn't define who I am, but it is part of who I am. And instead of letting it take it, we're just going to run with it in the most positive way that we possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
How have you tried to cope with this as a 7 years old child?
Well, I, coping as far as when I was younger, is that what you mean?
Yes. And did it happen one time, or it was like during a long time?
I think it was pretty immediate.
Died,
I think it was pretty immediate. I didn't know that depression was a thing, until I got older. I was in my teens when I found out what depression was. I just felt like I was always sad and scared, and that became my norm, and you feel it in your body. I still feel the tension in like my neck and my shoulders. It's like carrying this backpack like sandbags on your back, and that's all you've ever known, and I was really angry all the time, and I felt scared and isolated, and I couldn't understand why everybody was so happy, and I was dying inside. I just needed somebody to ask, hey, what's wrong? Hey, what is going on? I just needed someone to dig a little deeper at, certain behaviors. And one of the things I talked about in my podcast was I used to wet the bed a lot. I had a lot of vivid nightmares, and nobody asked questions. I was like in maybe my early teens, and nobody just ever asked. It was just more like a shameful, like, oh my God, you're this old, you shouldn't be doing these things. And it was just more compounding trauma on top of things that I was already facing. So I was just angry, and I felt like I was stuck in that anger, and then I got to my teens and I found out what, clubs and drinking and partying was. And that was my coping mechanism going through, those early years. It was, I just don't want to be in my own headspace. So let me go numb all of this, and I went through that period where if I didn't need to be at work and I wasn't at school, I was just didn't want to be in my headspace, so it was alcohol for the longest time, until I discovered cocaine. And then I was like, hey, this really numbs everything. And it was like, this is not where I want to be, and so it took me through that, spiral. And it was just a choice after I had my oldest, who's 14, say, this is not the life I want for her. The moment I found out I was having a girl, it was both exciting and yet traumatic for me. The anxiety was, oh my God, please don't let this repeat generations, and then you've got all these things maternally having to deal with being sexually abused as a child, and then going through the notions of being a mother and having the panic and paranoia and anxiety of, oh my God, I can't leave my kids with anybody because I have this overwhelming fear. It's taken over to where I have to just rewire everything that I've thought I've known to what really is, and then taking precautions and educating other people on the dangers of just leaving your child with other people, or, being around certain areas, or, in certain situations.
So Ashley, how would you approach a mom that tells you that her son or daughter just mentioned that they were abused by, let's say, a family member or a neighbor? Like, what do you think the protocol is for a parent to move forward with that?
Well, since I've been volunteering with the Rape and Crisis Center, that's actually, unfortunately, one of the most common calls or things that we have gotten. And so I've gotten that both, professionally with them and personally, through people that I've known or reached out to me. And the first thing is always just letting people know that they're not alone, is reassuring that you have a support system. That's really the biggest thing. And sometimes that doesn't come as the people that you may expect it to be. It may not be those that are closest to you, but there are people that are there to help. One of the first things too is reaching out to law enforcement, which could be triggering for some people, because there's always that negative talk of they won't believe, right? Because most of the time, there isn't evidence of these things. These things are being done by people that we trust, that we don't expect, so there's not necessarily documentation or evidence per se, but you definitely want to be able to report it to the proper authorities, right? To be able to get that person off the street, hopefully. And then the next thing would be, seek out whether it's therapy or a close, trusted person that you can speak to, because you have to let it out. I know from experience that you can't continue to just bottle it all in, and just be open and honest. Things are going to get hard before it gets easier, but it's one day at a time. You have to take one day at a time, and just to know they are not alone. Definitely, they're not alone.
Can we go into it a little bit more, if you feel comfortable with that? Like,
Sure.
How many times did it happen, and how can this happen? Actually, I just.
As far as specifics on times, it happened over, I want to say, a period of a year. So it was on a continual basis. It kind of started, minimally with like a graze touch, and then it, once he saw that he was able to get away with certain things, it was let me test the waters a little bit more, and I was really close to my grandparents. So we ended up moving to their house because my grandma was sick and my mom was their primary caregiver. And so I always just wanted to be near her, especially because she was, sick. And so I would go sleep with her, and it would start at night with like feeling, him touching me under my pajamas, or, you would be almost taken because you're a child and you're like, what is this? And so, I have a lot of traumas sleeping, or just hearing things, and so, it would be either at family events or pictures, and I'd be sitting on his lap, and, it would be these touches, or, a lot of the trauma occurred when I was brushing my teeth, or I'd be in the restroom and he'd pull his pants down, and it would just, it just took me, because I didn't know what any of that was. I didn't know male anatomy. I didn't grow up with a dad, so I never had any of that, and I was just taken, it would always be, oh, well, I'm going to give you this candy, or I'm going to give you this, and this is our little secret, and, I love you, and this is love. I didn't grow up with my dad, so I felt like there was that exploitation of trauma there, where he preyed on that, and he pretty much took me trusting everything about him and just mangled that up, and little things like brushing my teeth, the smell of toothpaste is triggering, you know, and that's why I think I can't count the times, but I can tell you how all of these ones have accumulated into my life now to trigger me straight back to that time, you know? And so I know it was over a course of a period of a year, and it was several times. You know, it was an ongoing thing. And the threats at the end were, if you tell anybody, I'm going to kill your mom and your sister, you know? And as a kid, those are all the people that you have. And I took it and I just shoved it down, you know? I just shoved it down.
Do you know who else that he also sexually abused? Like, how did you find out about the others?
Through different family members. Not everybody is wanting to speak at this point, you know, and I can understand that. You know, it took me 30 years to be able to tell my story. And what I understand is that everybody has their own time, you know, and everybody works through it differently. And someday, you know, I hope that they're able to speak out themselves.
Yeah. They're holding so much pain with all that. It's you bottle it in, and how do you function? It's just what amazes me that how people can, like yourself and myself and others, like, you know, you stay with it, and I guess not knowing, you just stay with the energy, and you know it's bothering you, but there's a part of you that doesn't, maybe from being trained as a child, part of you that doesn't want to go get help and want to fix it, and you have so much pain with it, and just like confusion and everything else. So it's just interesting when people want to hold it in, and knowing that you've been through it and you're surviving now really good, and they still they're not in their moment to tell it and to release it. Maybe they're worried that it's going to get worse, you know?
Yeah. You know, and I think too, the longer you live with it, you feel like it's just a part of who you are, you know? And I think it's letting it go, not the experience. I think it's all of the responsibility that you personally feel, you know, with either tallying, because, you know, some people don't want to get, you know, people in trouble, or they don't want to, you know, ruffle people's feathers, or they don't, you know, they're comfortable with the way that family dynamics are, you know, but it has to take somebody to say, I'm not comfortable. I'm not going to allow this, and I'm not going to associate myself with you if you don't see your role in this whole, you know, situation. Then, you know, you have to do what's best for you, you know. And I thought for the longest time that was selfish, putting my own needs, you know, above others, until I realized it's not really love if they continue to push that anchor while you're drowning, you know. And, you know, sometimes you just have to see things for what they are, not for what you want them to be, and continue to put yourself first, because it's not selfish. You know, it's something that we need as human beings. You know, we have to fulfill our needs, because there's so many inside that we hold back on that people don't know about, that they can't help with, you know. So you gotta, you know, you got to push it out, push that responsibility away from you to say, I didn't deserve this. I was no part in this. You know, it's not my pain to carry anymore. Yeah.
Have you tried to tell your mom somehow in a secret or something like that? Because of course he said like he will kill your mom or something like that. But
I didn't tell her
somehow.
I didn't tell her till right before I publicly spoke out. It was probably like the hardest thing I think I ever had to do, because I know she had this responsibility to take care of her mom, you know. And I think going through the healing process, I've been able to cultivate this forgiveness, because she didn't see the signs, you know. She's, you know, dealing with her mom, you know, possibly passing away at the time, and being a single mother. And, you know, you don't automatically think there's a molester or a sexual predator, in my home, and so finally, after telling her and hearing, her story and just how she grew up, I can only try to heal with her. There's things that she wasn't taught, or the way that she's grown up, that cultivates this level of understanding of she did what she could with what she had. But now we teach each other things, we're healing together. And I think ultimately that's probably the biggest thing. I couldn't have told her before, I just couldn't. The shame, I think, was more overpowering than anything. And I wasn't sure how they were going to respond to it. So, it took as long as it did. 30 years is a really long time, but statistically, most people don't report until later on in life, between their 40s and 50s. And that's because the trauma is so heavy. It's so heavy.
You have to guide yourself through it. You kind of have to, it's like a messy closet. You have to start compartmentalizing everything and trying to understand, okay, this is this is that. And then, 30 years later, you kind of piece it together and say, okay, I know what's going on because I've been telling myself over the years, and you start to figure it out, right? After 30 years, in the beginning, it's stumble, fall. You're in the dark with just a little flashlight and you just don't know what's happening,
And I think too is you kind of have to relive it as you're going through the healing process, because you have to acknowledge the trauma. And sometimes it takes you through the trenches. I started my podcast and I was going strong, and then the waves started coming back, because the healing process never ends. We may begin healing and we'll always continue to gradually heal, but there's no finish line. There's no, hey, I've reached this, it's never going to affect me again. And, I've gone through the motions of being like, okay, we have to bring ourselves back up because we're finding ourselves into a low position again. And I think it was the most perfect opportunity when I got your message, right? It was like divine timing. You're in it down here, but this is exactly what you need, and it's being able to have these conversations that are so healing and so empowering, but you got to get into the ugly before you get out on the other side, because you have to heal it. All the things that hurt and all of the things that you hold, you got to address it. You got to heal it. You got to confront it. And a lot of people are scared to take that first step, and it is going to hurt before it doesn't, but you have to, for your own personal soul and your sanity, is release that from yourself, and take the first step.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you have anxiety or panic because of that? Or how have you noticed the consequences?
I had anxiety probably as long as I could say I've had the depression. At one time I was taking a lot of psych meds. I was on 5 or 6 pills a day, antidepressants, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety, and the anxiety, I feel anxious about everything, going outside, being around people that I don't know now, making sure that I am safe. If I'm drinking, I hardly drink outside of my house now, just because I have trust issues, and have gone through other things myself later on in life that I'm anxious about the world. I'm anxious, what more can I carry when so much has already consumed me, And so I made the decision to actually stop all of my psych meds. I was on them for 3 years, and it kind of took me through a spiral where the suicidal ideation started kicking in harder. There were days where I felt great. The sky was blue, the birds were chirping, and the grass was so green, and then it would be a trigger or an event, and it would just take me to the lowest point. And I just kind of felt like I'm tired of kind of being in like a zombie kind of stage. Like, instead of just legally numbing it, I'm gonna address it. And, so I stopped the meds, and I started therapy, and talk therapy, and, the podcast and journaling, getting outside and listening, to my body and being in tune with what is it telling me. Before, I couldn't always explain why everything hurts, why I have headaches, why my neck and my shoulders have this pain. And after all this therapy, it was because this is where I'm carrying it. It was really educating myself, because I would think I was going crazy. I'm feeling this, but the doctors can't find this. I'm having all this unexplained sadness, but nobody can tell me why. And it's because I still physically, carry it with me. And to answer your question, as far as anxiety, I just try to breathe, deep breathing, see, something that I can see, hear something, smell something, taste, touch. I try to get back in, because there are so many things that trigger my anxiety. I just have to tell myself I'm in a safe space. I'm in my body. This is where I'm at. Because with a small trigger, it can instantly teleport me back to that 7-year-old version of myself. So I have to learn how to control it, but it's knowing my own body. What is it that it's telling me? Why is my stomach feeling upset when I'm around certain people? Or why is it that I can't relax my shoulders, around others? Or, it's getting to know that before the anxiety starts to spiral is I think how I've just been trying to manage that aspect without the meds.
Yeah, I noticed that with the child inside. Have you ever tried to like talk to your little 7-year-old child? Like, that's a big thing. I post a lot about the child inside your body, and there's times when my wife gets mad at me and I'm in the basement, she's on the first floor, and I'll actually see the little child like scared, and I talk to my little child and I say it's going to be okay. So your nerves go crazy, and when your nerves go bananas, that's when everything hurts, your neck, your body, your heart. So a lot of it is, what I've done is talking to the little child and comforting the child and saying it's going to be okay, you're not there no more, you're good now. And that I think is the big part, is that the little child is scared, is afraid of the world in front of her.
Yeah.
Making her safe.
Yes. That's the biggest thing, is safety. I think I was running from the version of little Ashley for so long that I actually took a class for adults molested as children. And one of the exercises was speaking to that younger version of you, and I was fortunate enough to tag along with my husband on a business trip this year. We went to Hawaii, and I took my 7-year-old picture with me. And while he was working, I went to the beach and I journaled, and I spent some self-care time. And I, even out loud on the beach, with my picture, speaking to my 7-year-old self and releasing the shame, the guilt, the responsibility of carrying that with me, and all of these burdens and all of this negative self-talk of not feeling worthy enough, or why did this happen to me? And I let all of that go on the beach, and it was the most therapeutic thing that I think that I could have done, was to let her know that she's not alone, and I am going to make her proud someday, because even though, we tackled those scary monsters growing up, or, growing up as a child, into adulthood, that I'm coming to save her, and she's safe. She's safe now.
Yeah, I had the same experience with myself. Like, I had panic attacks and severe anxiety in the past. Actually, I had it for 3 years or 4 years. And the biggest realization was that my child wasn't feeling safe. And even I went to therapy as well. And when my therapist said, like, say these affirmations, like, I feel safe and I feel at home inside myself, then I just felt suddenly so relaxed, and I started to feel better. And I just realized that was actually the root cause. Like, I couldn't feel safe. And when I went out to talk with other people, I just suddenly felt anxious. I also had the stomach ache and all of the bad symptoms which we usually have when we have anxiety. And yeah, making sure the child is safe and we are safe and we are at home in ourselves, it helps a lot. But of course, it's not enough to say it once and everything is good. That's the hardest part. Like, you have to repeat it and you have to approach this from multiple angles, actually.
Yeah.
Like trying a lot of techniques. I'm sure you tried a lot of things, like other. Yeah, what techniques have you tried apart from that? Like talking therapy, and what else have you tried?
My therapist and a couple other people that I had spoken to were telling me, hey, you should write Post-it notes, right? And leave them on your mirror, right? I'm safe. I'm worthy. I am enough. Today I will try my best. If not, there's always tomorrow. I had to put these things, on the mirror. I had to read them. I had to write them out. I had to tell them to myself, and put them in play every day. The journaling. I love to read. I love to write. I think being able to freely express yourself, just knowing someday maybe somebody may or may not read it, but being able to just be 100% transparent with a paper and not feel any judgment from anywhere, has probably been, the biggest thing. Getting outside, and even my dogs, they're very therapeutic. I sit there and talk and cry with my dog, and he just sits there and he looks at me and he expects nothing back but love. And just going outside, trying different things. I did stop the psych meds and went through a period where I felt like I was losing my mind again, and so I started doing, my own research and looking into things and trying, I guess, things a little bit more naturally. I tried using like THC oil or edibles, something that was different, right? It was on a different spectrum. I'm going to take what I know and what feels good to me or works, well with me. And that's been one of my biggest attributes is it allows me to be in my own body. It allows me to relax, to sleep, comfortably, feeling safe. And not, what is that noise? I have to sleep with a fan on and it has like a rattling and it's annoying. I'm pretty sure my husband gets annoyed, but it settles my anxiety because I know that it's there, right? And so I think taking different approaches towards finding what helps, you or, other people is one of the things that I think I was open to. It was like, oh, get meds. Oh, you're on meds. And then, you're supposed to be good. It was like, it served its purpose, but it didn't work for me. So let me try something different, And so, the use of, a gummy in the morning or something when I'm feeling anxious allows me to be present, in my body, in my surroundings, and allow me to just focus on the here and now. I'm safe in this space and, we can continue because for so long I'm highly distracted. I'd be at work and it's like, well, who's walking behind me? And I would have to have a mirror on my desk and the tension would build up and my stomach would hurt. And I'd be like, man, I can't work like this. I'm sweating and I'm so anxious. And it was like, okay, it's because I don't feel safe in my body or safe in my wherever it is. And that's just been conditioned over time, and it's finding what works best, for me, and researching things and being open-minded to other healing experiences on, hey, it might, be something different, and I think that's probably one of the most important things too, is talking with others on, hey, this worked for me, or hey, this worked for me, or, try this suggestion out. And one of my friends just suggested, is it Reiki music? Not too sure if I'm saying that right, but it's like, it's kind of like it might be, it's like a flute. It's like a very calming sound. And she's like, oh, you should try this. And I'm like, oh, okay, instead of just your generic white noise or my annoying fan. And so I started listening to it, and I was like, oh, it is so calming and so soothing. Thank you, and having these conversations, is, keeping an open mind on what may work for one may not work for all, because, trauma therapy, healing is not a one size fits all. We all walk different paths, we all have different experiences, but I do think that there is something that each of us can take from those.
So I'll explain how it works. So I've been healing myself for like the last 15 years.
Okay.
When something first happens, like a trauma of sexual abuse, you have to go through a period of cognitive therapy where you talk it through and you figure it out. And then once that's done, then your body has to heal. You ever done somatic experience?
I did like 1 or 2 sessions with that. I just actually finished my 4 years of therapy, talk therapy. So I'm like, okay, what else is it that I could do? And I had heard you, speaking about it. And I was like, hey, maybe I need to take a look into that.
1000%. Yeah. That's it. That's the answer. Everything you've been telling me, your body is still rattled. So what they call it, it's like a slinky that's stretched out in your body. And I had a practitioner that helped me, and she said that she helped a girl that she couldn't even go to work anymore because her body was so rattled. And you think that people behind you, that's because your body is still holding the trauma. You can tell yourself all you want that, nobody's going to bother me, but your body is still like you're shook in, when they say shook into the core, that's what it means. So, I do it with my wife all the time. I do somatic for her because she's been through a lot of trauma, and we do a lot of techniques, and she heals it. And then like when she used to think like she was making a mistake, she used to think her boss was calling her stupid when she made a mistake. I did some somatic with her. We did some techniques. And then she tells me like 2 weeks ago, she's like, my boss told me I made a mistake and it didn't bother me anymore, because you're healing the trauma in the body. So first you have to heal cognitive talk therapy, and then you have to flip it over and heal the body, the somatic experience. So you should really look into a somatic experience practitioner in your area. That's what they call, and stay with that person for a year, and you're going to see leaps and bounds.
Yeah, I think that's something I need to look into, because my body feels it. Right after he died, I'd find myself at the grocery store and I'd see somebody that resembled him. And it was like I was frozen. I couldn't get my hands off the cart. I couldn't move my brain. I mean, there was like a billion people in the store, and it was like a fast forward to just only me and then that person that resembled him in the store. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't smell anything. And I think it was times like that and a couple other triggering times where I thought I saw him in the car, and I'm like, he's dead, Ashley. He's dead. He's dead. I'd have to tell myself that's not him, and it just would take me to the levels, and it has, I could say that I'm kind of in the middle of it, where I don't want to leave my house. I'd rather get my groceries delivered, or, I'd rather not put myself through that right now, because the body can only take so much, and so thank you. I'm definitely going to look into that, because it's like, it's real, the pain is real, and you try to explain it and they're like, oh, here's an ibuprofen. And it's like, hey, I don't need liver damage, 10 years from now, because, I'm trying to heal that, when the root of it is somewhere else, you
Yeah.
know? So
Your
I'm
body,
definitely going to take a look into
your
that.
body's holding it 1000%. You go to 1 year and you'll be fine. 1 year of somatic and you'll see a total difference.
You have to let out basically that suppressed emotions, and that's the answer, because those emotions got suppressed, of course, because you couldn't even tell your mom, and that's very bad. And yeah, every time you get triggered, those emotions are trying to come up as a volcano, and yeah, it's not good to take some meds for that, because it's just further suppressing, and it's just symptom level solving. But you have to solve the root cause. That's the point.
Yeah. Get to the root of it, you know, because you just keep stuffing it down until there's nowhere else to take it, and it shoots out and in every direction, and sometimes unfortunately at the people that it shouldn't, you know. And it's getting to that point, you know, of where is it coming from, and being able to give yourself the time to deal with it, you know, because I think back and give myself the grace that if it took me 30 years to talk about it, I'm still reliving it in my body, and I got to give myself time, because there is no timeline that's going to say, you know, by the time I'm 40 or I'm 45 it should be over. You know, it may take the next 30 years, you know, to get it completely out, you know, but it's a process, you know.
Process, yeah.
And
you are getting better.
you know,
that's the point. Like, if you are
Your,
improving, you see improvement. That's the point.
your cognitive
Yeah.
is there. You're 100% cognitively fine. That's what I'm saying. You just need about 1 year of somatic. That's what I did. And then 1 year somatic. Because I was like, when I was first dating my wife, I was like, damn, I'm like, what's wrong with me? I'm like, I've done like 9 years of therapy. I'm like, why am I still not right? And I wouldn't sleep. I would go journal. I'd be afraid. The body would shake if I had it by a dream. So then I started researching and I got a practitioner. And literally 1 year later, I'm like cool as a cucumber. Nothing really bothers me. So, you know, and I had a lot of trauma growing up. So yeah, that somatic is because your body's rattled and it's holding on. Each area is holding on to every trauma, and it just shakes you to the core. And it just says, we got to do something. So now the body has to heal.
yeah.
And now, how is the
Yeah.
relationship with your mom? Like, you said you couldn't tell her in the beginning, of course, because you were threatened. But how is it now? You told her what happened and how she reacted.
We have the best relationship now. I didn't think growing up that was possible, you know, and we talk about everything, you know, and I think if anything now it's, we flipped the script 360, you know. We went from, we don't talk about things to, we're going to talk about everything. You know, if something's bothering me, I'm going to tell you. And if something is bothering you, you know, I expect you to tell me, or we have this level of understanding that no matter what the topic is or what the situation is, we both know that we're going to get through it together, you know. And when something happens, whether it be good or bad, you know, she's one of the first people that I want to go tell. You know, it's my husband and my mom, my two biggest life supporters, you know, and lifelines, you know. Is I've learned that there's nothing that I can do or say, you know, that's going to make me not want to tell her, or be afraid, you know, of what I think that she's going to say, because I know she loves me, you know. And I think it's all of these years of feeling unloved or not loved in a way that I felt that I needed, that, you know, I can see the way she is with my own kids. And, you know, I live vicariously through this version of her, you know. And I'm just glad that she's open and receptive to learning new things, you know, because I think, kind of have this expectation that because they're our parents, that they automatically should know, you know, they should know how, you know, we're supposed to be treated, or, you know, how we feel or we want to be, you know. And I think that it's also teaching our parents, you know, hey, this is how I feel, or this is how you made me feel, you know. This is like the generation of being in touch with our emotions and being like, hey, the way that someone feels is important, and we should take the time, to listen and to care. And I think that she's been very receptive to the change. Change isn't easy, but being open and honest, and sometimes it's ugly and sometimes it's, speaking out of anger. But I think that she's gotten this level of understanding of, okay, sometimes I might be angry and lash out, but because X, Y, and Z, it's not, why are you always yelling or why are you always upset? It's, we're going to talk about it, and so our relationship's never been better, and I'm truly thankful for it.
Are you proud of yourself for doing that?
I am.
Okay.
I am,
You should be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does she have any other siblings from your grandparents?
She actually comes from 10. So she's got 3 brothers and 6 sisters.
How is their relationship with everything that happened to you? Like, does your mom get along with everybody the same way? Has people fell off? Her siblings fell off? They don't relate to her as much?
She doesn't speak to any of them at all. So it was a total cutoff. Once my story went out there, it was like sides were chose. And fortunately, we were standing right next to each other. And I'm not going to say that it hasn't been lonely, because when you grow up with certain amount of people and you do have good experiences and you do have good memories and that you love them, it brings this level of pain to say, I love you, but I love myself more. I love myself more and I respect myself more. And I feel like during this whole process, her and I have been holding each other's hand through the trenches. Like, if they're not going to be behind us, I've got you, you've got me, and that's never going to change, and that's a hard dynamic, is to take everyone. It's like wiping it out, and I've changed the dynamic to say, so I don't feel it so negatively, is those are relatives, right? Because we don't get to choose our family. Our family's chosen for us, right? So I say family is the people that are here for you, and sometimes that's friends and that's community and that's other, people that you can find that safe space with. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be connected by genetics. I just happen to be connected to these people. So I say they're my relatives. My family is, the people that I choose, so I try to reframe how I look at it, so it doesn't feel how it really does, because it's hard, it's hard to think that you thought you had a family and instead you have a bunch of people that are comfortable as long as it's not trembling what they've got going on.
They had one face before your grandpa died, and now they have a different face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's hard. You're like, who are these people now?
Yeah.
And did you ask your mom, like, how was your grandfather's life actually? Like, what could be the reason that he done that with you? Behind it, like...
You know what? That's a good question. I don't think we've really dived too much into his past, his background, like the ways that he grew up. But that is something that I think I've learned along the process, right? Is what are the things that happened to him, right? Once I got out of the anger stage, right? I was in the stage of understanding, what could have possibly happened in his life that made him this way, and my mom's first generation American. My grandparents were born in Mexico and immigrated over here. And, so there's like a whole nother life of things that could have happened over there, and those are things that I think along through the healing process is vital for me to understand what happened, because not everybody that goes through abuse will continue to further abuse, right? But there are some that, you know, that's what they're shown, that's what's modeled, this is what's happened to them. And so that's what they think is normal, right? And so it's finding that, digging deeper, you know, I'm going through the middle of the emotions and, you know, in the midst of the journey. Those are things that I think are important to know, you know, and it's going back, you know, history wise, you know, and coming from a level of understanding, because it's easy to point the finger, and although my old self would have, you know, but it's what did that person go through to get them here, you know, because I know what I've been through and how I've got here, unfortunately. But I think in order to heal the generations before us, we have to keep digging back to understand where they were, you know.
Is your grandmother still alive?
She's not. She unfortunately passed in 97. So she passed significantly earlier than he did. He just passed this last year in 2022.
So, yeah, I was going to say if you could have found out information from your grandmother, but yeah, that's way too long.
Yeah.
Does he have any siblings, your grandpa?
Not that at least that I can remember, or we ended up moving away, and we weren't really in touch with his side of the family very much. It was just really my grandma, and then all of, you know, everyone else, you know, aunts and uncles, because there were so many of them, and, you know, cousins and second cousins, that we weren't ever really surrounded by his family. You know, they were either back in Mexico or they were spread out within the United States.
That's something maybe you can dive into, like find if he has a brother or sister, and then kind of pick their brain and say, what happened to grandpa? Why was he like this? You know?
Yeah.
So you can give yourself a 360 of your story, and that's an extra little healing for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So your mom didn't notice any, like, anomalies, or I don't know how to say it, like, obviously she
Signs.
grew up, signs, like, did she notice anything, or not really, like?
I don't think so. You know, I think that I used to isolate myself a lot. You know, it would always be like anytime we were home, I'd always go to my room, right? Or just want to be by myself. And I'm not sure how she translated that. You know, I didn't have my dad, so it was always, you know, I felt alone anyways. And so it could have been, oh, well, you know, I might have been isolating myself because of that situation. You know, it was compounded, one situation on top of another, you know, and so I don't think that she saw anything. And sometimes I think too, the trauma blocks things from your brain to either not either accept it or not acknowledge, right? And so we lose these times and moments. You know, I have so many of them where I'm like, wait a minute, I was there, or such and such happened. You know, I think I went through like elementary school and I was in the thick of my trauma, right? Because I was 7. And so I'm like, okay, I remember this and certain things. And then it's like, there's like this whole block where it's like no recollection.
It's totally normal. Yeah, your brain does a blow a fuse kind of thing too, because it starts to see that it does two things. It blows a fuse and it numbs you, where you start to not feel anything. So it's a protection mechanism to protect you from too much. It's like the water, the glass of water is overflowing, so it kicks in this protection where that's your body doing it, where it shuts you down, it backs out all those memories, and it also numbs you so that even things happen like you just smoked some weed, like I don't care. That's what it is.
Yeah. And I think too, with her dealing with all the things that she was dealing with herself personally, you know, I didn't understand it till I became a mom myself, you know, and I think there's so much going on that sometimes you may not notice those little things, you know, and so taking that, how come you didn't see the signs, and that anger and turning it around to a level of understanding is, okay, I could see why you didn't see that, you know, or I was always angry and everybody's like, well, that's just the way she is, you know, and it's like, well, no, that's not really the way I am, but that was their perception. So I think signs wise, maybe she didn't realize something was wrong until maybe I was partying too much. She would have conversations with me like, something's going to happen to you. Actually, you're going to get hurt someday. And I'm just like, turn my phone off. Why are you calling me? And it was like, hey, you're not on a good path, but prior to that, I'm not really sure, whether she saw it or not. We've had, little conversations, big conversations, but here and there, touching the subject. Sometimes it's like you can't rip the whole Band-Aid off at once. You just kind of, got to inch it off a little, because it's heavy. And it's not only heavy for me, but it's heavy for her, because I have to think to myself, if it's heavy for me as a parent's perspective, I can only imagine the pain that it is to carry as a parent, right? And how that puts you in it. And so it's cultivating understanding and, compassion for each other. It doesn't just normally affect one person. There's so many dynamics to it, but together, the common core is healing.
As long as you guys have each other's back and stay strong, that's the main piece,
Yeah. Yeah, I got her. She has me, and
everything else
we may have lost numbers, right? Yeah. But it's quality over quantity.
You're in a dark forest with just a flashlight. You'll figure it out how to get out of the forest, but you just got to be together and work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask also, what if your mom did notice any signs about your grandfather, like if he was aggressive or something like that, or because if he said like he will kill your mom, then that's a sign like something bad was happening there, or like did she notice anything? Or
no, because he wasn't an aggressive person, honestly. That's how
he had a mask then, like
yes, then like imposter syndrome, right? So I guess speaking about it now, I can understand why it was so hard, or could be so hard for others to understand, because he wasn't. He was a very patient person. To everybody else, he was loving, he was giving, always take, us out to go shopping or to eat. And it was like, the perfect person. But, behind that, behind closed doors, when, the true monster comes out, and you're able to manipulate someone, and someone being so small, you want to, inflict something so that they won't tell. And by telling, a child at 7 years old, I'm going to take the only two people that you have in this world, if you tell anybody, that will, for some people, that secret will go to the grave, and so he was very good at manipulating other people. The other people that I've spoken to that have said, it was either groping or an extra hug or something inappropriate being shown on TV, was like, okay, so I'm not going crazy. I didn't just imagine that I went through all of these life experiences. You're validating the same person, the same monster I saw, someone else seen, right? But to everybody else, he was the most perfect grandparent, giving, very generous, but behind some of that, it wasn't, I'm just going to give you something for nothing, and I think that was the hardest pill for them to swallow, is that he was like Dr. Hyde, or Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, right? Like, yeah.
But it's like Bill Cosby. Like, Bill Cosby got an MD. He was on a great talk show. Like, groomers are so good at developing this world so that they can't get caught. And I think what your grandfather was doing was, he had a master plan. He opened up the blueprints, and he knew that if I create this world, even if she came and ratted me out, they won't touch me, because I do this. So I think in his mind, it was all the big plan. Like, I will do this to young children. If I donate money, if I give money, they will not even believe the young children. It's a really demented mindset,
It is. It's pre-calculated, you have to manipulate so many people for such amount of time to prove you're this one person, you know, to other people. There, you know, he's generous, he's loving, you know, and, you know, all of this facade for something that you're doing on the outside, you know, and that's something, you know, that we have to pay attention to. And I think it's all boiling down to communication, you know, and being able to speak about, you know, what privacy areas are and boundaries, and, you know, speaking to kids about it and educating other parents and letting them know, you know, sometimes the talks are kind of scary, you know, and it's going to be more scarier to have a talk later on, you know, if something should happen, you know. So I think it's putting these boundaries out there and talking to our kids about what safe spaces are and what our bodies are, and that nobody should ask them, especially adults, to keep secrets. You know, we have surprises, right? There's such thing as, hey, I'm going to get so-and-so a birthday gift because it's a surprise, right? But it's modeling it different for our kids is no safe adult is going to make you keep a secret. And if anybody threatens you, you know, you have to know that it's safe enough to come, you know, speak to, you know, us. God forbid that somebody were to say, hey, I'm going to kill your mom. It's like, I don't think so. I'm going to go speak out and tell my mom, you know, instead of harboring that in.
Well, you should be really proud of yourself, the strength that you've gone through, and you're so determined right now, even though you lost pretty much all your family and your mom lost all her siblings, but you know exactly what needs to happen here. You know your path ahead. You're 100% sure this is the right way. That's all that matters. Like everything else is just blurred out. You have your path. You proved it to yourself. Stay on that path. That's everything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for others who may be dealing with the same challenges as you?
I would say, I know it's scary, you know, it's the traumas that we all experience differently. Hold on, right? Because when you're in the thick of it, you know, and you think that that is the only thing that you have, hold on, right? Because today may not be bright, right? But it might be tomorrow, right? And give yourself the opportunity to be able to change your story, right? You're not defined by it. It doesn't make you a specific person, you know, and try to heal yourself for you, not for anyone else, you know, and to try to find someone that they can, you know, speak to and have a safe space and community, you know, because talking is healing and it's therapeutic, and just releasing it, you know, and releasing shame, you know, and everything that comes with that, you know, is just hold on, you know, because there are far more brighter days that are ahead of any of the darkest ones that we leave behind.
Mm-hmm. And when you're deep in it, don't think this is your world forever. You know, like I was deep in trauma by myself, and I stuck in. Now I'm married. I have a beautiful, amazing wife. I have a nice house. So a lot of people think this is their life forever. It's not. You push through. You go through the hard times, the dark times, and eventually it opens up, and your life will be a 180.
Yeah, most definitely.
Very good.
Tell us, how can our listeners connect with you? Like your Instagram? Do you have the podcast?
Yes, so I have. You can find me. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram and Spotify at Speaking Out the Podcast. And yeah, definitely reach out. I appreciate you guys having me on. I am definitely looking forward to having you guys on my podcast as well. Yes.
And if you do need help with somatic experience, let me know, because I'm healing my wife. I'm healing her sister. And, you know, it's a whole different ball game from cognitive. So totally different.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to digging deeper into that, because I feel like that's where I'm at right now.
But yeah, if you can't find one, you know, let me know, because I do that also. So it would have to be on webcam, where, you know, you would lay on the recliner or couch, and we go from there with the camera further away. But a person in person would be best, with somebody there with you. So
Yeah.
I'm sure you have some in California. I mean, they call somatic experience practitioners.
Okay, let me just.
And when you're talking to me, I'm like, this poor girl's body is so rattled up.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you get, because your cognitive is done. You know exactly what you have. You're not emotional. And when you talk about your issue, so you've gone through the emotional part, the cognitive is totally done. So the other part is just somatic, which is quick. It's just a matter of just doing these little techniques that we do are totally different from cognitive. And you'll be on your way probably like a year.
I'll be looking forward to it. That's for sure.
Yes. And we would love to have you back and let us know your progress.
Of course. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for coming and good luck with everything.
Thank you. You guys as well.
All right. Take care, Ashley.
All right. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.